we are live. Yes.
And hello, Germany. Hello, Nadia. And hello, everybody. We are slowly getting people joining us at this live session. This has become a weekly event. So either Wednesday or Thursday, we run them from all over the world. And today we have an extreme pleasure of welcoming Nadia, who's based in Germany, as I said. And she's been working with us, Nadia, what, 7 years now?
I think I first came as an intern in 2013, so it's been 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It is a long time. And tell us, what do you do at Polaron?
So I am basically the office manager of the German office, and my main responsibility here is to do archival research in Germany for all our clients. So whether that's clients who want to apply for Polish citizenship or any other German citizenship, for example. And I would try and trace all of their documents and their ancestors' documents that are located in Germany.
Mm-hmm. And that is why we're so excited to talk to you, because interestingly, even though a lot of our clients apply for Polish citizenship, there is quite an intersection, I guess a lot to do with German archives. So could you maybe explain to us why that is, and why is research in Germany necessary when we're pursuing Polish citizenship, which sounds a bit strange, but it is true.
Yeah, so to explain that, I have to go back a little bit in history. So obviously it has to do a lot with our unfortunate history with World War II. And unfortunately, of course, a lot of Polish people during the Nazi regime were deported to Germany, were deported to concentration camps or for forced labor. And after the war ended, a lot of them couldn't or didn't want to go back to Poland for various reasons. And so they stayed in Germany for quite some time before they emigrated to all parts of the world. And so we have a period of about 10 years for some people that they lived in Germany. And so a lot of their documentation still is in Germany. So they might have gotten married here, they might have had children here. And all of these vital records and all of these documents are important or essential for applying for Polish citizenship. So we have to find marriage records, birth records, or any other records that might still be in Germany.
And the interesting thing with all of that is that many people ended up in Germany undocumented, as you would call it today. So lots of those records were created based on verbal statements or witness statements. And I think you're seeing through the archival information and documentation you get that some people's identities are not always so clear. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. We've had a fair few cases where we've had someone applying for Polish citizenship and they gave us their grandfather's name and we started doing research for them. And in the end, it turned out that he went under a completely different name in Germany or in Poland. So it's sometimes a little bit of puzzles that we have to solve a little bit, putting together information from people that have different names or different identities. So it's really important that we open up different archives because they might give us information about different spelling, different identities, and all of that.
And I think, I don't know about you, but I think I have the best job in the world, because you're kind of like a big brother a little bit in a way where, you go back in history, but I think through documents, we're able to find out so much more than a lot of people know about their ancestors. So could you give us an example of the types of documents you might be able to get your hands on if you were to go to the archives and look for things?
Absolutely. So it just like you said, it is extremely interesting. And I have so many people getting back to me saying that for obvious reasons, their grandparents didn't speak much about the war and their time in Germany because it was an extremely painful memory. So sometimes we're giving them documents that they've never seen before, that they've never even knew existed. They didn't even know their parents were in said concentration camp, for example. So it's really interesting unraveling that history. And some of the documents, obviously, we would go into registry offices and get vital records and all of that. But I think the far more interesting documents are usually the documents we get from the ITS, which we'll talk about in a second, I believe. And they can be anything. So they can be records from concentration camps. So you can see prisoner records. You can see exactly what belongings the people went into because they were taken away from them, and all of that was recorded. So you can exactly see what they were wearing, what they had on them the moment they got deported. They can be, unfortunately, also death records, of course, if somebody passed away in a concentration camp, forced labor records, so they show where someone worked, what they worked as during the war. And then, as I said, all that time after the war, where people lived in Germany as displaced persons. So where did they live again? What jobs did they have during that time? And it can be anything, and that's also the fun thing. So anytime I request records, they might be a type of record that I've never received for another client before, because it's always a bit of a treasure chest to open.
So it's sort of like learning history firsthand in a way through documentation, and I think through your work you would be able to share that with us. But a lot of our clients' parents were born in Germany, because I guess what happened just after the war, when freedom came, parties and having fun came. So a lot of women got pregnant, and lots and lots of people were born in Germany. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually do have so many people, and I was just working earlier, and I had that case again where, so the war ended in May of 1945, and then so many people, I would say the majority of people, got married right after that because they were finally free. They might have met someone in Germany or even back in Poland, and they were together at a camp or doing forced labor. And as soon as they were free, they could finally get married and start a family and actually start living their life. Not saying that erased all of the painful memories, but at least they could cherish life again. And so, yes, we definitely have so many marriages taking place in 45, and then children being born shortly after.
And Nadia, you mentioned ITS, which stands for International Tracing Service. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about that institution? Because I think we've been you have been personally working with it for the last 7 years, or since you've come on board, and you went for a visit there. So could you maybe explain to us what it is, what do they have, and how do you work with them?
Yeah, definitely. So just to avoid any confusion, they also recently changed their name. So they go by Arolsen Archives now because they're based in Arolsen in Germany. So if you see both names somewhere, they're both the same institution. They just recently changed the name. So the ITS was originally founded as the name says, as a tracing service still during the war by the British Allies. And its original aim was to reunite families that were torn apart in the war and find missing people in Germany. And that work was continued after the war, and today they've developed into world's largest center on Nazi persecution. So basically, to sum it up, all documents that have to do with the Nazi persecution and Nazi regime in Germany would be located there today. So all records on concentration camps that have survived the war, because obviously the Nazis burned a lot as well towards the end of the war, all records on forced labor, and all records on displaced persons, they would all be located there today.
So my understanding is that they held records from about 1933, which is when the regime was rolling out what would you call it, like prisons essentially, and persecution towards all kinds of people.
Yeah, so the Nazi Party officially gained power in 1933, and that's when the more systematic persecution started against Jewish people, but also other groups of people. And that's when the records started as well. And then they would stretch all the way until, I would say, roughly 1950, because as I said, it continues recording the life of displaced persons who stayed in Germany for a good while after the war.
And I think the interesting thing with this particular archive is that it's only been opened, I guess, to public quite recently. So that there was always this air of mystery, or like you had to wait for months before you got access to it. But things have changed a little bit recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are, I think last year or the year before that, they started digitalizing a lot of their files. So not everything is digitalized yet, but you can go online and look up, just type in a name and look up people. But as I said, not everything is digital yet. So it's still, if you want to look up your ancestors, it's still worth it sending them a physical inquiry. But it's already great that you can get like a first glance online.
And there are lots of information such as, would you maybe be able to give us a few examples of the types of things? You already mentioned concentration camp records, death records, but also post-war. So a lot of Poles I know, particularly men, worked for the US Army, so depending on the zone that you were in. But you can find even army records, discharge records, employment records, school records, things like that, yeah?
Yes, definitely. So after the concentration camps were freed, and that's actually a bit of a really sad part, is that a lot of people just stayed in the concentration camps, and the camps were turned into displaced persons camps. So unfortunately, they had to stay in the same place. Of course, the camps were changed a little and the conditions were better than in the concentration camps. But they stayed there, and the camps were basically just taken over by the Allies. And then the people living in these camps, the displaced persons, just continued working for the Allies in various functions, obviously under better conditions than during the Nazi reign. Sorry, there's a fly here.
We're alive.
And so yeah, they continued working there, and these all of these labor records and all of that would also be online. So I don't know, maybe we can have a look and just pull up some random records and see what we find.
Great.
Let me share my screen with you. Okay, let me know if you can see this.
Yeah, we can.
Perfect. Wow. So this is the website of the Arolsen Archives or International Tracing Service. And if you want to look for something online, you would just want to click on Search and Explore, and then you can click on Search the Online Archive. And it will give you a bit of background information on what you can find there. And then you can just click to the Online Archive, and then a separate site will open. Okay, and you have to agree to the terms and conditions. And then that's it. You can just type in any name. So let's see, what would be, just going for a very generic German name and see what comes up. So obviously there are a lot of records coming up for this name. You can see them all here. And the good thing that I should mention, because you might be a bit surprised as to the different names that you can actually see here. Obviously, as this is a very generic name, you can also find a lot of records. But if you type in a name here, it will give you a phonetic search. So it will search all names that have a similar spelling, because obviously, especially if we're looking at Polish people, as you mentioned earlier, they didn't have any records. They just came and they said their name, and then they would have a German officer sitting there writing down their name, and they would obviously spell it very differently. So if you type in a name there, it will give you different spellings and spelling options. Maybe let's type in a little bit something more specific. Yeah, so this gives us less results, for example. And as you can see, I typed this in Joseph with a Z, and you can also get the results with an S, just as an example. And if you click on that record, you can immediately open the record and see it here.
Wow, so there's photos, there's everything there.
Exactly.
Wow, amazing.
You can get photos. This would have information on the birthplace, yes, fingerprints as well. The
religion.
Family status, religion, origin, even the house number he used to live in Poland. So this gives us all sorts of really valuable information. Let's see what this would be. Yeah, again, they would be records. They would say, so he worked here for this farmer in this area here in Roxheim in Germany as of the 22nd of September 41 until March of 45. So this would be one of these work records, for example, a registration card. So yes, really all sorts of records that give us very, very important and interesting information.
That is pretty amazing, and as you said, anybody can tap into it. When we were just before we came online, I guess we were also discussing research skills that you do have to be able to tap into the right information, because yes, it's available. Yes, you can try it yourself. There's no problem. That's why we're showing it to everyone. But you do have to be knowledgeable about what the database contains and how to tap into whatever it's got. Yeah.
Yes, because the difficult part is mostly finding out whether that person you're looking at is the ancestor you're looking for. Because as I said, even if the name is a bit rarer, there might be 5 different people with the same name in that archive. And when you send in an inquiry, especially because as I said, they're not all of the files are digitalized, you do want to put more specific information to help the researchers on site track down that specific person. And that's something where I think it was really helpful to meet them in person, because they ran me through how they work and how they find a person in their records. And they could also give me some background information on what identifiers they would look for. Obviously, date of birth is one, but they can filter through many categories, such as for example, concentration camp numbers or ID card numbers. So they can filter for a variety of different things. And it's really good to know what can help them pinpoint it down to one specific person, so you can give that tool to them and help them find the person you're looking for.
So it is pretty sophisticated, and it's sort of garbage in, garbage out. So you do have to know firstly who you're looking for, what you're looking for, and I guess have the right skills to be able to tap into it. So there are many people that are passionate about research, and they could be spending hours and hours and days and weeks and months looking at things, and it truly is fascinating, because it gives you like a first-hand picture of what people went through. And I think the other thing I wanted to say is that if you read between the lines, you can see the trauma and the hardships people went through. What I was going to ask you now, Nadia, before we came online, we were talking about one particular case, and we can't, reveal too much. But there's nothing better than a case study, right? I think people relate to a story better than paper. So could you tell us about that story of the that we started talking about before we came online?
Definitely. So we've had this one client that was a very, very memorable case. He was also going for his Polish citizenship, but he didn't have too much information on his mother because his mother was his connection to Poland. But when he was a baby, his mother had given him away, and he eventually ended up in Australia. We did have a bit of information, such as date of birth, etc. So we went into all sorts of German archives and tried to pull up information, and we found out that she ended up in a mental institution in Germany, where she spent the rest of her life and eventually died there. So with that information, we were able to send an inquiry to the hospital that still exists, where she spent the rest of her life. And we were able to pull some records from that hospital. And that was truly fascinating. So we found a picture, for example, of that. And it ended up actually being the only picture that he had ever seen of his own mother. Because he left when he was a baby. He had never really met her. And all of this information was completely new to him. And it was really, really moving. And through these records, we also found out that he had a brother he had no idea about. He was older than him, and so when he was a baby, he didn't obviously remember anything. So we found the name of his brother. We went into even more archives to find out more about him. We ended up pulling up his brother's birth certificate, and we started out not even having a name. We didn't know what that man was called. So we ended up even pulling out his birth certificate, so we knew his name and his date of birth, where he was born, etc. And we contacted a couple of archives, got a few documents on him, and that was a really moving case, because this man had no information on his family apart from his mother's date of birth, and we ended up giving him a picture, giving him some information on how she spent the rest of her life, giving him some information about his brother that he had no idea about. So that those cases, and there are a few of them, are usually very, very touching.
I think that's just such an incredible story, because you wouldn't think that paper can talk in that way. And I think one of the reasons why people haven't been able to find it is that this particular archive you're talking about, Nadia, was closed to public for many, many decades. And I guess partly because it was to protect people's identity, and there was, I guess, I don't know if you agree with me, but there's quite a lot of shame attached to it, or stigma. And you know, we through our work we do discover that people have committed bigamies and all kinds of petty crimes, like there was nothing, you know, but people have been adopted, or unmarried mothers, or stuff that we do not care about today. But in 1945 or 1950, there was a lot of shame around it. So I think it was one way of you know, protecting people that may have been still alive even 10 years ago from you know, disclosing this information. So one of the reasons why these archives were made available quite recently was the negotiation between the German and Polish government to open them up and make them you know, free and you know, completely open to access.
Yeah, and I think also one of the reasons is that unfortunately now we have more and more witnesses from that time passing away. And I think it just makes us more aware how important it is to preserve their memory and their story when they're not here anymore to tell it to us in person. So I think there's also this growing awareness of preserving that part of history and preserving these people's memories.
Nadia, we're so very fortunate that we have you on staff, because I mean, I can, you know, I know you personally, but hopefully everybody that's listening can hear that passion and you know, yes, we have a painful history that we share, but I think the only thing we can do right now is help people reclaim that, as painful and traumatic as it has been. And I think you know, just with your example there that you gave us, you know, we can help people close that loop and you know, perhaps move on, which is, I think, really important. And it's a secondary or perhaps primary benefit of going through something like Polish citizenship, because it does give you a lot more information about who you are as a person, where you come from, what your family went through, and a lot of it is very painful, and it helps people reconcile with history and you know, with who they are as people. So I think it's something that we see pretty much with everybody that ever goes through the process with us. What I was hoping to do now is we've got a few minutes for questions, but I did want to ask you about your work and how sourcing documents from archives can actually help people get Polish citizenship, because it sounds counterintuitive a little bit, but given what we've said earlier, that sometimes people do not have any documents, it's a good starting point, right?
Yeah. So I believe that in a lot of cases, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Polish government requires vital records from the person you're claiming your Polish citizenship after. So that's the first reason that we have to go, if they were born in Germany or married here, we have to go and find these certificates. That's the first thing. And the other thing is also that my work heavily influences the work of my colleagues in Poland who are doing research in Poland, because sometimes they don't have anywhere to start with. So we know that somebody was born in Germany, we find that birth certificate, but we can also contact other archives and maybe pull some residential records, pull some other types of records that will then give us more information about their previous life in Poland, because it would have a place of birth or a place of residence there. And then I can then pass on this information to my colleagues in Poland who will be able to work with that and do further research with that.
Yes, and we're not going to have time today, but the other very important aspect of your work is, I guess, look at records that are prior to 1933. Because if people know the history, they'll know that a lot of Poles, particularly Jewish people, actually had business interests or lived in Germany or were born in Germany. So sometimes your work also includes state archives and national archives and all kinds of things where we find amazing documents, maybe except for Berlin, because that was really quite severely destroyed during the war. But German authorities have pretty good records. That's fair to say, yeah?
Yeah, so we are usually very lucky with finding records in German archives, except for Berlin, which doesn't mean we never find anything there. It's just more records have been destroyed there. But generally, they have amazing records and stretching all the way back to the 1800s. So I do a lot of research, for example, for German clients as well, going back that far, because we have to trace their German heritage. So we would be able to pull these records, and they contain so much valuable information. And again, they could be a variety of different things: residential records, business records, work records, health or social insurance records. So again, it's a bit of a treasure hunt. You never really know what you're going to get in the end, but it's always fascinating.
Listen, I've really enjoyed talking to us. Believe it or not, we've got 6 minutes left, so I'm going to hand over to Andrea. This session's always finished too fast for me, but I will hand over to Andrea with a few questions if people have any.
Yeah, it's been so interesting, but we do have a few questions, guys.
Sure.
So one lady's asking us, my Oma was born in Elbin, Germany, which is now Elbląg, Poland. She was born in 1922. Am I eligible for Polish citizenship or not?
We don't know, because the area that this person's talking about used to be Prussia. So this is the Lake district of Poland, and it's currently in Poland. It depends whether they consider themselves ethnically German. So you've got to remember that Poland, even in its present borders, does have, people that consider themselves ethnic German. And there is a provision in the Polish law that kind of clashes with Polish citizenship. So I'd have to know a little bit more, but we always approach these kinds of cases with caution, because it also depends what happened to this lady's ancestors during the war. Because people of German ethnic origins were classified by the Nazis. And I think there were 4 or 5 levels of classification as either ethnic Germans right up to collaborators. And, this is again the painful history that Nadia was talking about. But there are provisions in the Polish law preventing some people from being able to reclaim Polish citizenship if they were collaborators, let's say, with the Nazis. So it's not that clear cut. I'll be happy to talk to this lady afterwards. But Elbląg, or the city that she's talking about, is in Poland right now, and it was part of Prussia, I believe. So I know exactly where she's talking about. I've been there. It's a beautiful area.
Thank you, Eva. We have a very interesting question now. If you have a parent born in a place which was part of Germany, but is now Poland, can you apply for citizenship to both Poland and Germany?
Nadia, did you want to tackle that one?
So I would say, answering for German citizenship, we could definitely go into archives and do some research and pull out some records that state the nationality, which I think would also be essential for Polish citizenship. If they lived in what used to be German and were Germans, they might definitely be eligible for German citizenship, even though the territory is now Poland. And I think that if they're eligible for German citizenship, but Eva, correct me if I'm wrong, because they were Germans, that might exclude them from Polish citizenship.
Yeah.
So it would be either or, I would say.
They're kind of mutually exclusive, but again, it does depend on quite a few other factors. So, each case would be looked at individually. And we do have a specialist in Poland, Marta, who we might ask the questions the next time she's doing a webinar, because we do have a couple of clients in exactly that position, that they sort of they can't get either. They qualify for both, but they can't get either because of how each country looks at their citizenship status. So in terms of the ancestry, or, because I've said that in previous webinars, but Poland's got concepts that are citizenship, nationality, heritage, and origins. And they kind of, they're very different, but they kind of clash with each other, particularly in consideration of German nationality or citizenship. So we would need to look at this person's case on merit, I guess, or individually, and then we'll be in a position to respond. But at the end of the day, it is up to the governments to tell you what they think. And they're not always right. Let's put it that way. Sometimes we have to argue with them and, get them to our way of thinking. But generally speaking, they are mutually exclusive, just depending on what year and who and which generation. There's quite a few considerations like that.
Okay, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but we still have 1 minute for one question. Can another country's documentation be considered valid for application in place of Polish German documentation that is missing? For example, an official Canadian immigration form or vital statistics.
I might tackle that one, Nadia, if that's okay. So essentially, any documents that are created outside of Poland are as valid because they're vital records created by an authority, okay? But to be able to prove your Polish citizenship effectively, efficiently, and it's sort of a guaranteed outcome, I guess, is you do need Polish documents. So any documents created out of Poland are considered kind of secondary, but they are still essential to your application because you have to prove who you are in relation to your ancestors. So, for example, your own birth certificate is proof that you were born, that you exist, and on it, it'll have your parents' names. And let's say one of your parents was born in Poland, then that links you to that parent. And, you know, you might need to go a few generations, but I don't know if I'm answering this question correctly in the way that it was asked, but essentially any documents that are created outside of Poland are official documents and they're considered official, but they are not the same as being able to prove Polish citizenship. So even though on your Canadian or Australian or American documents it might say that you were Polish, Poland will not look at that as proof. It'll contribute to that picture being painted, but it's not going to be as valid as a document created by the Polish government in Poland.
Thank you so much, guys, for such an interesting discussion today. Thank you, Nadia, for your time. We hope you have a wonderful day in Germany. And thank you, Eva,
Thank you
as
for
well.
having me.
No, that's been amazing. We've got to do it again.
Yes.
It was a lot of fun, and I love the way that you explain everything with such a lot of care. And you're one of my favorite people in the world. I will tell you before we go that Nadia speaks. Okay, let me get this right: German, Spanish, Finnish,
French.
French. Help me anymore. Swedish. Wow.
And yeah.
Did you not study Russian recently, or did I make
that
No. Okay, that's next
no
on the
Russian
list.
yet. Yeah, next one.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so very much, and
Thank
we'll
you for
see everybody
having me.
next time. Okay.
See
Bye.
ya. Bye.